Okay, so in the second part of the video, we're just going to finish these notes. Let's look at this third example here. We have solve v equals pi r squared h for r. You should recognize this from the first video and the first example that we did. With that one, we solved for h. This time, they're asking us to solve for r, which remember what they're asking us for is we want to, our answer, we want to get it to the point where it says r equals something. Now here's a little hint, just like in the second example we did where we had a square root symbol, anytime there's something funky like an r, like an exponent, like if what we're trying to solve for, if it's under an exponent or if it's under a radical sign, get that all by itself first before you take care of the radical or the square root sign, or the square. So what I'm getting at is we want to get the r squared by itself first before I do anything with the exponent. Now remember too, from the first video we talked about the fact that we can multitask. We can divide by more than one thing at a time. So in this case, since it's p times r squared times h, everything's multiplied together there. To get rid of any of it, we would divide. So since I'm trying to get the r squared by itself, I divide by pi and h. So now I have r squared equals v divided by pi times h. Now I want to get rid of that exponent. I want to get rid of the squared. Remember yesterday we talked, or not yesterday, but in the last lesson, we talked about the fact that what undoes a square root is a square. So the opposite is also true. What undoes a square is a square root. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do the same thing to the other side. So what happens is the square root and the square undo each other, so we're left with r equals the square root of v divided by pi times h. So now if there's a follow-up question like this one, and we're asked to assume that we have a fixed volume, this time it says of 500,000 cubic centimeters, write the formula for r in terms of h only. So now we just substitute 500,000 in here for v. And technically, we haven't learned enough to be able to figure out how to simplify this, so right now we'll just leave it as it is. It's kind of a silly question there, but let's look at the next one. The next one says a certain ancient pyramid has a volume of x cubic meters. Each side of its base is 231 meters. We want to solve this equation, v equals 1/3 times the area of the base times the height, for h. We want to get the h by itself. I'm going to write it like this. Again, we want to get the h by itself. Now remember in the previous lesson, in lesson 1.6, we saw equations that we tried to solve that involved fractions. Now the one thing we said is we didn't talk about multiplying by the reciprocal, because oftentimes multiplying by the reciprocal can often lead to more problems, because sometimes it keeps a fraction in our equation. For example, let's just say for right now this had been 2/3. Yes, I could get rid of the fraction by multiplying by the reciprocal by 3/2, but then what happens is I end up with a fraction on the other side, and we don't want that. Okay, so don't necessarily multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Just focus on getting rid of the fraction. So for this one, I'd multiply both sides by 3. Now this is all one term, so don't multiply the b by 3 and the h by 3. We multiply each term by 3. We only have one term on the right side, so 1/3 times 3 would just be 1. On the right side I have 3v. Again, we're trying to get h by itself, so now we divide both sides by by b. So I get h equals 3v divided by b. Since we have a little time, let's just talk about, again, that whole idea of multiplying by the reciprocal. Let's say if I had an equation like this. T. Okay. If I wanted to get rid of the 2/3, and if you multiplied by the reciprocal, what would end up happening is you multiply both sides by 3/2. And so we'd have 3/2 y equals x times t. And let's say if we were trying to get t by or x by itself, if I divided both sides by t, now I have a fraction within a fraction, which is not proper. So that's why with a problem like this, whoops, what you would want to do is multiply both sides by what's in the denominator, multiply both sides by 3. So we have 3y equals 2xt. And if we were trying to get the x by itself, I would divide both sides by 2t to get x equals 3y divided by 2t. That's much better than that ugly thing that we had a second ago where I had a fraction divided by t. This is much simpler, and this is actually the proper way you'd write your answer. But that's just a separate example just to illustrate why we don't multiply by the reciprocal. Basically, with this one here, now that we have this formula, we would take 3 times the volume, which is 2,614,689, divided by the area of the base. Each side of its base is 231 meters. Now remember, area of the base, if you're dealing with a square, is side squared. So we would just take 231 squared. Again, what we're talking about is a pyramid that's got a square base. The area of the base is 231 times 231. When you simplify this, you get 147 meters would be the height of the pyramid. So good luck, and hopefully all that made sense.